So today's video question was, lovebird or parrotlet, which one's better with kids? And which one would withstand temperature and environmental changes better? And do I recommend males or females? So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Kaylin, the author of The Parrotlets Vs Lovebirds. Please be sure to get your copy on Amazon.com so that you have your handbook, and that way you know how to provide a quality life for your parrot, no matter what kind of parrot you have, so that you can then have quantities of bliss. Today I am joined by my parrotlet, Raindrop. And no, this is not a very big lovebird. I used to have a lovebird. I loved having lovebirds. I actually, we had more than one. But I don't have lovebirds anymore, and this is my white-capped Pyonis, who is a baby and constantly needs babysitting. So I'm sitting on the baby, not literally. So between a parrotlet, though, and a lovebird, maybe you saw my previous video, which do I like most, or why do I like a lovebird or a parrotlet more? But so this is kind of a follow-up to that, since someone asked some great questions, and since it's a very similar question. Which one of the two is better with kids, Raindrop or a lovebird? The truth is that it's really like you have to make sure that your kids are good with birds. In other words, unfortunately, no matter what, when you have a parrot and you're just getting to know it, your parrot's going to be scared and it's going to defend itself. So it's possible you'll get bitten. If you know how to handle a parrot, it's more possible you won't get bitten. If you don't know how to handle a parrot, there's a learning curve, and so you might get bitten. I know, you're always hungry. Mwah. Yes, you're always hungry. Yes. So you really want to teach your child, what a great opportunity to teach them to love animals, to love nature, to be understanding that the parrot is so small, whether it's a parrotlet or a lovebird, and that you have to be careful that the animal's scared, they have to get comfortable, they have to adjust. If your bird has a companion, I think one advantage is that I think they're going to be more emotionally stable because they're going to have an immediate flock with a creature that's their own species. If they don't have that, then, your parrot, whether it's a parrotlet or a lovebird, may be a little ill at ease because it's trying to bond with people and children. Sometimes children can be very erratic, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a very, they're very energetic, they're all over the place. Whereas, for example, as an adult, I try to constantly kind of go slow around my birds. If I'm going to pet my birds, I try not to come at, sorry, sweetie, I don't come at them with my hand open. I try to come at them with as few fingers as I can. I try to come slowly so that, they kind of see what's happening. I'm not just jumping on them kind of thing. And so children can be more erratic in their movements and stuff like that because they have more energy and they're coming from a different place. So I think that I would recommend having two of whichever species you choose and really teach your children. I will also say that between a parrotlet and a lovebird, if one of my big concerns was my bird and my child getting along, especially if my child were younger, say 10 and younger, then I would look at getting a barred parakeet or a linny or lineolated parakeet. Linnies are a little larger than parrotlets. Don't get me wrong, I love parrotlets. I also really like linnies because I have both. But linnies, they're a little bigger, but it's not that. It's the fact that, in my experience, they're a little less bitey. And so I would feel more comfortable that that maybe a linny would be a little more forgiving with my child kind of thing. And, I wouldn't want my child to get bitten too much and have a negative experience, that kind of thing. So hate to throw that wrench into the works and add a third species, but there you go. Now, the second question, which one's going to do better in temperament environment changes? I don't quite understand the question, but here's what I will say. When it comes to temperatures, parrotlets don't have a really big tolerance when it gets too cold or too warm. Their range is going to be, I think it's like 60 to 80 degrees. So if you I don't understand what that means exactly, but if your parrotlet's going to be outside or your lovebird, it might be better that it be your lovebird. In any case, with any kind of parrot, you really want your parrot to be acclimated to the weather. If your parrots live outside, then as the temperature cools for the winter and gets warmer for the summer, your parrot's going to naturally adjust. For example, as it gets cool for the winter, they're going to get more of those down feathers. And so their body's going to be able to handle it. Whereas if they're inside with you and then you put them out like at night, that could be very hard on your parrot. So just be careful, because if there's a temperature change, there really shouldn't be an abrupt temperature change. Your parrot should either always be outside, with few exceptions kind of thing, so that they're acclimated to the weather, or they should really always be inside, where you probably maintain the weather at a certain, like maybe in the 70s, that sort of thing, where you're not putting the house down to freezing and then it gets hot in the summer. You don't want them to have like a roller coaster change. And you want to be really careful that they aren't in front of a window where they might get too much heat and not be able to escape the heat in the summer, or right next to a vent that's going to spit out really warm air or really cold air. And again, they don't really have a place to go when they're in their cage to either go get warm or go cool off, or simply get out of the continuous airstream. So in nature, of course, your parrot would be able to go wherever they want to adjust for the weather, and when they are at home and in a cage, they're not going to have those, that ability. So please take that into account, whether you choose a parrotlet, a lovebird, or really any other parrot. All right, question number 3, male or female? Here's the interesting thing. A lot of people are going to prefer male parrotlets and maybe lovebirds as well, because male parrotlets can be taught to talk. I don't know technically whether or not lovebirds can be taught to talk, but I'd be surprised if you cannot. Generally speaking, with a lot of parrot species, if you really put time and effort into talking to them, hi Ale, hi Ale, hi Ale, until you repeat yourself and you're going to go crazy, your parrot probably will pick up what you said 500 times. But don't forget, they do say it in their parrot voice. So I might say, hi Ale, and if he repeats it, it might sound like, I don't know. You kind of have to develop an ear for parrot speech, unless you have one of the few species that are really good at mimicking the human sounds. So otherwise, you kind of have to really be able to hear through that little parrot voice kind of thing. But for that reason, a lot of people do pick a male parrotlet. I find that the females, like Raindrop, I feel like they're a little more, they bond to me a little more. Don't nibble on my earpiece. And for that reason, I kind of tend to prefer the females. This baby is supposed to be weaned. He is, are you like 5 months old now? And I don't mind still feeding him, but that's why he's asking me for food. I'm like, okay, I'm happy to feed you, but don't eat my ear. Yeah. So I find that the females, I kind of feel more comfortable. Like, I feel like they bond with me a little more. But it can be flipped around. My daughter feels like the males, she prefers the males. So some of it is kind of like a personal preference thing. But another thing is, what you could keep in mind when a parrot is hormonal, and in some ways, the males are always kind of geared up to be dads, and the females are kind of always geared up to be moms. The females can be very guarded of their space, because if they want to make a nest, and I recommend, if you have a pet and you're not breeding, I recommend trying to make sure there's nothing to encourage sort of that nesting behavior. Don't have a nest box for them. Minimize your seeds, that kind of thing. But then, if the females have something that they get like territorial about, they can be pretty territorial. The males, they can kind of get to be the same way. or they can get to kind of fighting if you have other males. So those are two things to keep in mind. They can both sort of have their hazards, if you will, when they're in that mode. Now Ali's flying around. And then the bonding, it just sort of depends. But for me, really, and I've had other people say the same, the females, they're a little more, just like women, I feel like they're a little more emotional, or they're a little more like wanting to find like a bond, a friend kind of thing. And I'm not saying that the males aren't. I'm just saying I feel like the females have that a little more. So you could choose a female if you feel like that's kind of what you want. But if you want a talker, you may prefer the male species. All right, I hope that gives you some really great information on the difference between Parrotlet versus Lovebird when it comes to how they are with kids, the environmental things they can withstand, because your lovebird, if your lovebird's acclimated to being outside, he came back, then your lovebird's going to be fine. But don't forget, just don't all of a sudden throw them out, in the dead of winter or in the heat of summer. You got to really let them adjust. And there's a few words on gender, because I feel like it kind of depends. I feel like birds like have a preference, and sometimes people say that male birds prefer female people and female birds prefer male people. I don't really find that to be true in my flock, but I do feel like the females are just a little more social, generally speaking, throughout my species, my 22 species. And I do feel like the males can be really social too, and some of it depends on the species, that kind of thing. But I love female parrotlets. So they're not going to be quite as colorful for you, but that's my first choice. Thank you for joining me in this blissful ear nibbling video. I will catch you in the next feathered video. If you have any problems with your parrot having some separation anxiety, please make sure to get Tink's must-have Parrot Relief on parrotbliss.com. It's CBD in hemp oil. I will catch you in the next feathered video.